Greetings all. Welcome to the second installment in our two-part special series here on the Enterprise Edge podcast that we're doing in partnership with SAP, entitled Supply Chain Planning Reimagined. Thank you to those who have been engaging with our first episode. This one is figuring to be just as lively and hopefully as educational and instructive for our community here. Once again, I am joined by Xavier Duprat, Vice President, Supply Chain Planning and Fulfillment at Cascades, based out of Canada, and also Joel Beal, CEO and co-founder at Alloy AI, one of SAP's partners. This time around, we're going to focus in on autonomous decisions, right? If you think about supply chain planning is no different than many of the other functions right now that are being sort of disrupted by agentic AI and enterprise AI in general. And so we're going to be looking at kind of real world implications of autonomous workflows, autonomous decisions at production scale, not sort of in a sandbox or a proof of concept type scope. And it's a moving target, obviously. We're not going to present perfectly, formed use cases and case studies, but we're going to hear some great insights from Joel and from Xavier about what's happening at Cascades in this area as they continue on this journey. And it really is. It's a journey in the sort of retail CPG supply chain that we're talking about here. So before we dive into the questions today, I'm going to just stop and welcome Joel. Thanks for being here. And welcome Xavier. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, guys.
Same. Nice to be here again.
Good to see you again. Let's get rolling. We've got a lot to cover. So, in the first instance, I want to use an analogy of in the aviation space, right? Completely different space. There are things known as automation surprises. Automation surprise is the term, and basically that's where the pilot is caught off guard when the autopilot has done something unexpected. Right. And it's really, if you look at the stats, it's one of the leading contributors to aviation incidents that are categorized underneath human error. And so using that analogy, I think supply chain, can learn a little bit about that, in general, but certainly in the planning space, decisions that planners can't interpret fast enough or maybe override if that's required in an intelligent, level-headed way. And so to remind everybody, sort of Alloy, Joel's organization operates at the data and sort of insight layer, right? Surfacing signals, if you want to call them that, market signals that could contradict, what SAP's IBP's own models are showing. And Cascades and Xavier's organization, they have planners who they have to act on system recommendations across 25 North American plants, essentially in real time. So it's kind of a long setup, but that's sort of the setup. So the question is, for Xavier, let's start with you. What guardrails have you actually built to keep your teams in, in control, in confident control? And has the system ever made a call that maybe made your team nervous or suspicious or, distrusting of some of those autonomous or semi-autonomous recommendations or decisions?
Yeah. So just to put things in perspective from last call, so we're talking about our partnership with Alloy and Joel is exclusive on the tissue sector, right? So
Yep.
we're talking about 10 sites.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
But your point is really good, Mark. And
Yep.
And I think we're at a historical milestone or pivot in terms of what you talk about putting the autopilot on, especially with Alloy.
Mm.
And I know Joel has been very active this week, so they released their first agentic AI capability. So that's huge. So the replenishment agent is I think it's the first one. And today, because we can talk, there's two things. IBP and Alloy, they complement each other, but Alloy really solves the problem that I'm sure all the manufacturers in the CPG face today by
Mm-hmm.
connecting retailers and embedding that with our ecosystem, which is IBP. But to detect the problems from retailer and bring that internally and take action, that's all
Mm-hmm.
manual. So
Mm-hmm.
now we have the platform, we can connect all the dots together, but it's still a manual and cumbersome process, honestly. And
Yeah.
I've been doing it myself. We have the visibility, it's great, but it's still a lot of click around and figure out what we need to do. And there's some automation, don't get me wrong, great automation, which we use for certain retailer, but at the end of the day, we tend to lack the time to cover everybody because
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of our partnership is to cover all the retailer as they are our most important retailer and be able to do everything automatically, which is where we're heading, I think, with this week's announcement, which is going to be a major milestone. Is going to be how do we put the autopilot on and then automatically replenish all our retailers, which is really the key because the data is more abundant than ever, and for sure we cannot process all of that with the team of planner that we have here. So for us, your question, the guardrails, the what have we done, I think that's something that we're going to have to define together, and probably Joel already has that roadmap. But for sure we expect not to be a black box where we just get the solution. We need to understand the context of the decision, what drove that decision, be able to explain it. We have to have a certain threshold, if we let the autopilot on or off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these are going to be the key question going forward. But I think today, where we're at that milestone. And the same thing with IBP. IBP is more, let's say, the AI right now is more into understanding, let's say, the optimizer result. So it's more about understanding and explanation. And very soon, and we're about to enter also phase test, is how do we automate the decision, the maintaining of parameters and cost parameters and basically all the parameters that planners use on a daily basis. So I think we're at a great place right now.
That's great, Xavier. It's a good springboard over to you, Joel. We talked about explainability in so many words, and I guess that's my question for you is, and you think about the role that Alloy is playing in this ecosystem, and with some of your other customers, perhaps. How do you design for kind of high velocity explainability in this sort of scenario that we've just gone through here?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things, and this predates generative AI. I'd say the same thing came up with machine learning, where nobody wants a black box,
Mm-hmm.
right? People they don't trust them off the bat. It's like, I can't explain it. I can't tell my boss where this number came from. So I think this is huge. I think, as Xavier said, everybody's early in this journey. Okay, so the number of fully autonomous supply chains out there, I'm assuming, are zero. But some companies are certainly aggressively moving in that way, and I think others are a little more slowly. So there's a couple of principles, though, that we think about as we're building software in this space. I mean, as Xavier said, we've had automation for a long time in certain areas. Gen AI allows us to really close the loop. Certain things that in the past we haven't been involved as much in. So taking a very practical example, these replenishment recommendations that Xavier mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We've had now for a number of years, we can go run replenishment algorithms. We're taking all the retailers' data, we're taking Cascades data, how much inventory do they have, what they're producing, where is that, putting that together and saying, hey, retailer, you're running low in stock. We're beating your plan. You should order more. We're going to run out of stock if you don't. But it's been on then the team, and sometimes we'll even output that in the exact retailer's format. We'll give you all the evidence to support that, but somebody still needs to take it, package it in a new email, send it over, respond to any questions, all that type thing before the order is actually either accepted or rejected. And what we're trying to do now is say, well, we can just have an AI agent do that, right? We're already doing all the math. And that's one of the elements here is we don't want AI doing math, actually. I think you want to have something that's predictable. You know how things are calculated. Every number, as we develop it, we're like, you can see exactly where this number came from, what were the raw data points, what were the calculations we did on it, to kind of create that recommendation but we're going to do all the packaging, if you will, for it. We're going to put it all together, and we're going to have it ready. And so you come in the morning and we say, we've generated this recommendation. I've written the email. I've provided the justification. The person is still in control, right? So I think that also gets to, I still have someone who can look through that, do that last second sanity check. Is there something that we don't have context about that maybe impacts this recommendation that should realize to change it? I can go manually override it if I want to.
Yeah.
But hopefully what we're going to see is people are going to say, hey, the vast majority of the time, these are good. It's one button to click, that goes out. And again, we're making, I think, people be able to spend their time most productively because they're not having to pull a bunch of data together and write emails. They're more able to just do that check, bring in that last bit of context, and then go. So that's really how we're thinking about it, is always keep people in control. You always have that ability to override, change things. But if you build enough confidence that you say, hey, 95% of the time or 99% of the time, this is right, and you want to say, let's just have it go automatically, we're not there yet, but that's the goal, is people will build that trust over time and you will become more autonomous.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's so, another nice segue, guys, to the next topic here, because, I think in my observation, most companies understand the sequence of maturity call it the steps in the maturity curve, quote unquote, in AI, sort of going from what you might call assisted to recommended to autonomous, to use somewhat generic terms, right? I think where people are struggling sometimes is what is the pace, right? What is the pace of that maturation and those steps, and how long do you spend in each phase, and when is the right time to kind of take that step that it sounds like is imminent for Xavier and his team, as far as pulling the trigger on an autopilot type use case. So I guess this question has to do with like organizational decision rights. Xavier, for you, when you think about like who inside the organization, obviously you probably play a key role, but I mean, who decides, or who will decide, or has decided kind of when is the right time? When are the conditions correct? When is the trust level and the confidence level to a point where you move more and more into that autonomous set of use cases? Is it tangible? Is it intangible? Tell me a little bit about how that decision process has worked in your team and in your peers.
I think for us, initially, let's say the mindset is that it's not owned necessarily by IT. So, and I'll give you an example. We have different function, and every organization has different function, but I don't think personally it's IT's role to, be aware or detect the opportunity in AI for, let's say, supply chain. Or I think it's going to be part of each of our responsibility as leaders. So if I'm in HR, I need to be aware and curious about what's happening in HR, etc. So for us, it started. We always been very curious by nature to try new things. So 15 years ago, with SAP, IBP started. So we were probably one of the first to go in, and now you see the success of IBP where it is today. Same thing with Joel. 3 years ago, Joel probably didn't have a lot of customer, and we saw the opportunity. We met at it was like a Gartner event.
Yep.
I was a bit skeptical in the beginning, but we did a little proof of concept, and it scaled up pretty quick, and we see the value. And at the time, the AI piece was more, let's say, invisible, because it was more in the data in the background, because we're treating a lot of data in terms of store and SKUs, etc. So not as visible for the user, but at least we spend that time really, let's say, strengthening our understanding of the system, linking IBP and Alloy together. So we have that foundation now that's solid, and Alloy deploys the agentic AI this week. We're gonna be ready to go. So and we're gonna be we want to be the first to partner with them and develop and really push the AI component. So that's gonna be great. And so I think the mindset comes from each leader. Obviously, to our CEO today, it's part of this priority. So I know the executive team, they're really aware and curious, and they do some visits also with other company to see what's out there, because for sure, if we look only ourselves, we're not gonna lead. So we need to be with the best in class in the industry. So that's where we're at.
Yeah,
It's definitely gained a lot of traction and attention from executive team.
that's great. So Joel, from your seat, if you think about readiness, right, as a term, right, are there things, are there traits, are there indicators that you see across customers like Cascades where you know they're ready, or it seems as though they are ready to make that next step in that sort of maturation journey towards more and more autonomous workflows? Does it differ by company? Are there common threads that you see that indicate that a company is ready from a maturity or discipline or transparency or data perspective?
What I definitely think this idea, as you said, it's a maturation, and AI
Yeah.
isn't like the start of it, right? If you don't have your
Right.
data together, if you don't have your knowledge base internally, uh, it's going to be hard to really become an AI first company, if you will, right? So I do think, yes, we look at companies, and that's something as we're selling, we're trying to understand where are they? Like, is this a
Yeah.
company that's trying to get basic visibility into what's happening with their supply chain, or is this a company that's like, no, we've had all this tied together for years, and we're trying to make those next steps about becoming more predictive or prescriptive, or then fully autonomous. So I definitely think you look at that, you try to assess. I think getting to your initial question of like, how do you decide when you move from one phase to the other? One of the things I see, we both build software with AI, and then internally we're trying to drive our own employees to
Yeah.
become more efficient and automate more with AI. So I kind of see both sides of it, and I think you have to set the tone at the leadership level, but ultimately the maturity is based on how much your team is really using it, and they're pulling it in that direction. I think the really top down mandates, you're seeing this in a lot of companies right now. CEOs who come in and say, okay, we're going to evaluate how many tokens somebody's using, which to me is kind of a crazy metric to be optimizing for.
Yeah.
Um, it's going to create some weird incentives and probably a lot of
Yeah.
unnecessary spend. But I don't think, again, I think setting the tone that this is important for someone's career and you need to do that. That's what I tell my own employees. I'm like, this is not just for us as a company. This is for you as an employee. You better learn how to use these tools,
Yeah.
and that's going to make you more marketable. But I think it really has to be, you give them the tools, you give them the training, and then it's like start to see what happens, and that will bubble up. And I think you see the people that really embrace it, they start to show off to other people, look at what I've done, and that really builds. So I think to me, that's a lot of the maturation or how this is going to play out.
Mm.
I think it's going to have to be more bottoms up than just companies making mandates. Maybe that sets the tone, but it's like,
Yeah.
have you have the right team with the right tools, with kind of the right mindset to start making this happen? And that's where it gets exciting, because somebody is inspired by what somebody else has done. They say,
Yeah.
oh man, look at what I can do. And then it creates that nice kind of self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah. No, it's good points. I mean, let's look at it in a scenario where, let's say, and this might be very, very close to home for you, Xavier. You tell me if it's if it's a good example for you. But in supply chain, oftentimes, as you know better than I, you have situations where you might have a supply shortage or something, and you have to allocate, right? You have to make allocation decisions, which basically in poor man's language means, some people's orders are fulfilled and some people's aren't. Some retail partners get product and some don't, at least for some period of time. And I guess I'm trying to play this forward as maybe a higher stakes, higher risk use case where you'll have Alloy AI as a partner, perhaps surfacing inventory shortage in the channel, that could affect major customers, maybe before it shows up in an ERP system, right? So, like SAP, right? So, if you think about AI and the role of AI as it's evolving quickly in your sphere, I guess, how would you approach something like that from a customer or partner facing perspective, where you might have AI at least weighing in on the decision on who gets product and who doesn't,
Mm.
and then having to explain that to a customer or partner, if you follow, like almost like an assisted explainability scenario. If
Mm.
you does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
you mentioned orders, but not necessarily all orders mean that there will be out of stock on the shelf, right? So
Yeah.
I think the big advantage that we have with the partnership in Alloy is the visibility at each store.
Mm.
So let's call it micro events, small events, and big events. So small events, we're going to be able to breeze through pretty easily because we know if we have to do some kind of allocation trade-off, we know we're not going to hurt the in-stock, which ultimately is the goal. So we can take maybe a hit on OTIF. Maybe we'll skip an order or two and we'll give it to someone else, but everybody is going to be at the same level. Everybody maintains their in-stock. So for us, that's definitely something that we can explain now, that we can explain to the retailer. Obviously, it's manual. So to our
Yeah.
point with the agentic AI, it's a lot of work to pull all of that together, write the email, explain, and. So for sure, that's going to be a benefit. So that's one thing. The other, when you have an event that's more of a magnitude, and let's say you cannot fulfill, then it comes into the process, let's say that every organization must have when there's a catastrophic event or something really like COVID, something like that, where you just can't control. But again, to guide on the in-stock versus guiding on because when let's say something happened and the orders are through the roof, you don't necessarily know. The orders don't tell you if it's needed or not. So we have that intelligence, but definitely to be faster, to react with AI, I think is going to be a nice milestone.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's still early, right? But I think that the obvious near term value and potential is apparent pretty much in your business. And
Mhm.
one of the other areas of this is, and I know that we're not all career technologists here, but I mean, I do have a question about one of the, I would call it a more of an architectural question when it comes to the overall solution stack, right? There's a school of thought and practice in the world of enterprise AI that sort of espouses the value of sort of monolithic models where you have one large model and it basically does everything you're trying to do. The other side, or a other side, is that you have more multi-agent systems where you have specialized agents that are handling specialized fit for purpose tasks. And in my semi-informed view, I think Alloy AI, Joel, is kind of you guys are sort of a purpose-built specialists, and you have retail data and analytics that feed into systems like SAP Integrated Business Planning, or IBP, and then you have Cascades that is I think in the tissue business and also some of the other parallel businesses, Xavier, is sort of a classic multi-stage supply chain, right? And the question against all of that is there a point of view that you have, Xavier, or maybe your business or IT colleagues, with regards to what's the right architectural approach when it comes to sort of those two broad scenarios I started with, sort of that big monolithic model approach as opposed to more of multi, specialized agents operating in parallel in collaboration with one another?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think, like, if I compare it, let's say, to our journey, let's say in terms of planning. So we went from being, let's say, jack of all trades in our jobs to more specialized, definitely because of the environment that's more complex. The retailers are more demanding. The technology also evolved in the past, let's say, 10, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
drastically. So for us, it was more important to specialize, let's say, our talent by, let's say, you focus on on supply planning. You focus on demand planning instead of having someone that covers everything, just because the pace of technology and what I talk about. So and there's different, the data is super rich. The timing is important. So we look at days, we look at weeks, months, quarters. So the timing also, and the granularity also depends. So for us, and at this time still today, it makes sense, we think, to maintain this path. It might change in the future with what AI is going to bring to us. But I think to have everybody specialize and have your kind of AI companion also that's specialized. It seems logical for me. Maybe I will be wrong, but I think that's the right path to go. And then you just stack those AI agents together, and it drives the business. That's how I see it today. But again, like you, I'm not. I don't pretend to be the expert.
Yeah.
But so far, that's what works best. And again, the short term, the long term is too different. I think it's really, for me still today, I think it's important to keep them, of course, synchronized, but kind of separate, because the people focusing on the long term, if they're all their day, they're on the urgency and the short term, they're not going to focus on the long term. And the long term is super important, and it declines into execution. So I'm still there today, but we'll see. We'll see if that evolves.
Joel, let me reframe it a little bit for you, and maybe in the form of a request for advice. Like, how would you advise your direct customers and or prospects in terms of how to think about this architectural? I wouldn't call it a problem, but maybe it's just a choice, or maybe it's becoming less and less of a debate, and people are opting for the direction that Xavier just talked about. But how would you advise people to think about this issue of sort of a monolithic architecture as opposed to more of a distributed multi-agent system?
Well, I think first and foremost, and Xavier said this, nobody knows how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that it doesn't matter who you're talking to. Nobody knows what the right architecture for AI is going to be. And so I think Xavier makes a really important point of, don't try to optimize for a future that you don't even know what it looks like, right? I would optimize for today, and where it seems like, I think most people can kind of agree on at least the short to medium term, even if the long term is a lot fuzzier. I think we're going to end up in a place that's kind of similar to where software is today. There is going to be cross-cutting infrastructure. We have the core foundational models, Anthropic, OpenAI, that can do anything, and they're insanely powerful, right? Obviously, in their capabilities. But if you even look at what those companies are doing in the last week or two, they start joint ventures and they do consulting. It's very vertical specific. They're putting out products that are very specific to certain areas. So I think they even recognize, as strong as those models are, you need a lot of domain experience as you decide to go after finance or supply chain or retail or, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And so, I think we'll end up in a world where there's, those foundational pieces, which certainly the core LLM is going to be part of it, and then you're going to have a lot of vertical specific work and expertise, right? That's brought in. And, I think the best guess at this point is you're going to have these different agents that are vertically specific, and you're going to have these general agents that basically orchestrate and tell them what to do. And it's all going to be connected instead of through APIs. It's going to be through MCP servers. So it's just going to be probably something kind of akin to the way we have in the world today, where you've got these cross-cutting, data infrastructure layers, and then you've got vertically, specific software on top of it. But like I said, that's where we're going, and we'll see how it all plays out. I'm sure I'm not going to be fully right here. And I think the most important thing for most companies is, how do I go from there's this cool new technology to I'm actually taking advantage of it and getting value? And I think that's the best thing everybody should be saying is, how do I, there's so much noise, what's real, what's not. Like probably everybody's less far ahead than everybody else thinks the other party is. But, how do I go get real value, start to develop that muscle? You're talking about change management within an organization. And so then I can adapt as we find out what the best long-term architecture is.
Yeah, Joel, that's smart. And I also think you hit on something that we're going to end up ending with here as we approach the end of our time. But it's all about outcomes, right? If you think about what are we bothering with all of this for? Well, we have certain business outcomes we're trying to affect, right? Like any kind of transformation or modernization initiative or season, right? So we talked about this a bit on the first episode in terms of early returns that Xavier's team has seen and maybe even expectations. So I thought maybe we could end on a brief discussion around metrics and KPIs. That's if you follow what's happening in this space, that's where all the conversations now are. It's all about operational payoff. It's all about financial outcomes. And by the way, in shorter and shorter runways, right, with less and less patience from the office of the CFO, right, or CEO or boards of directors or what have you. So the novelty is worn off long ago. It's about outcomes. Joel, to your point about it's no longer cool technology. So with that as the backdrop, Joel, why don't we stick with you as for the first round on this? Again, maybe using your perspective of working across multiple customers and use cases, are you starting to see benchmarks emerge with regards to KPIs or payoffs in scenarios like this where you're talking about, fairly complex supply chain and inventory challenges in the retail space? We've talked about what some of the key KPIs are when we talk about, OTIF and in stock and things like that, lost sales, things like that, out of stocks. Are you seeing any benchmarks emerge that you might consider to be beginning to set expectations in terms of what people can expect to see maybe in the first round or two of this stage of their maturity?
So often, this is often a common question we get, and
Yeah,
I can't necessarily come in and say, hey, your forecast accuracy is going to get this much better, or we're going to
yeah,
drive down your out of stock rate by X amount. We can look across our customers and we say, hey, these are some averages. I mean, we talk about bringing POS data into your forecasting. Generally, we've seen 15-ish% improvement in performance, but there's going to be some companies that get way more, some companies that get a little bit less.
yeah,
I know Xavier before talked about incremental orders they're getting. I think he talked about reductions in lost sales. So, obviously there's a lot of really concrete numbers there, and it varies by customer, right? Because everyone has a different supply chain, different setup. I think the thing though, this is the thing I'm excited about, or one of the many things I'm excited about with AI. Right now, or at least historically, again, we'll make a recommendation in Alloy. And then Xavier's team will go take that, they'll package it up, and they'll send it out. And then sometimes they'll come back and they'll say, hey, look, we got this extra order. It was worth $500,000. And we're excited, right? Great, good ROI. With AI, it changes because one, we're involved in that. We don't need to hear the story anymore because we send it out on Cascades' behalf or any customer's behalf. We see the response, we see the acceptance or the rejection, and then we can start tallying that up. And so there's a much more direct relationship. And when you talk about ROI, obviously on spending on technology, and every technology company is thinking about this right now, is our business models need to change. It should be like, you're only going to pay us if we drive value. You're not buying
yeah,
shelfware. You're not buying, hey, here's just a license. It's saying, you're going to pay me based on the outcomes I drive for you. Not even help you drive, like the outcomes that I directly am
yep,
doing. And that's going to take some time. I mean, this is like the hot thing in AI. It's like, and I'll use one example of why I think this is harder than people sometimes think. So, we use Anthropic, we use Claude Code, our whole engineering team does. We write a lot more code than we used to.
hmm,
They love to show us those numbers. That's something front and center. Look, the average engineer is writing 2 times as much code as they did 6 months ago, or whatever it is. Is that actually making us twice as productive? Is our software advancing twice as quickly? I mean, hopefully it's certainly getting faster. I do think it's getting better, but the outcome isn't lines of code. The outcome should be like how much, hey, I can build this much faster. And so I do think that we're kind of taking those baby steps of starting to associate more with outcomes, but ultimately, if I'm a buyer on the other side of the table where I usually sit, I'm going to say, okay, you're X amount of dollars. I want a return that's multiples of that, and I want as high a confidence as possible I'm going to get that. And the best way is we say you only get charged for the value that we drive. So I think that's what you're seeing change. I mean, a huge seismic shift in software of how do we shift pricing from kind of this legacy, you pay us an annual fee, blah blah blah, to you're going to pay for the value that we drive.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the top headlines now is there's different economics around the consumption of the technology, which is a monumental shift. And I guess, Xavier, I'll give you the last word here as we wind up in the same topic here. I'm currently working with a few clients on strategic long range plans that are like 5 years out and struggling mightily in like years 3 through 5 in terms of what we should be expecting, right? In terms of cost benefit of some of these investments, call it generically speaking, agentic AI related. And so I guess my question for you is, as you look out on your planning horizon with you and your executive peers, do you have a sense for what that successful scoreboard looks like in, I don't know, fill in the blank, 2 years time, 3 years time, 1 year time, however long you're looking forward? What does that success look like with regards to specific KPIs, either operationally, financially, both?
So just to complete, let's say, Joel, what you were mentioning, the KPI, the metrics. So 3 years ago, so we met about 3 years ago. Before we met, our success metric was, let's say, apart from profitability, etc., let's say customer specific, customer success. It was the OTIF, and today it's the in stock. If we didn't meet Joel today, I'm sure we would not be talking about in stock. It was a metric that was known by probably 1 or 2 person. I didn't know about it, and today everybody knows about it. Actually, today we had our monthly, let's say, tissue sector reunion, and we mentioned that our in stock improved by 2%. Everybody was applauding. It's the first time anybody applaud for in stock results. So just to show you the importance of that metric, because we want to be the partner of choice for retailers. So it's important that we go beyond just the traditional KPI, which is you order this, I ship you that. Okay, if you're not, I'm gay. But most of the time, it does not necessarily translate into out of stock. So I think going forward, that's going to be still the main metric for us to measure success for our customer. And again, we're just going to get better, because still today there's room for improvement. And you see when you open the box in the beginning, you'll see your lost sales, and you can argue on the mathematics, but it's not rocket science. So that's the eye opener. I think it was for us. I'm sure it is for a lot of people. And when you see your lost sale, you're in stock, your opportunity to protect your revenue, and for us, since we're in private label, it's our revenue, it's the retailer is the same revenue. So it's the same. We're the same team, so we need to make sure that everything gets on the shelf. So that's the ultimate goal, and we want to extend that also to our B2B industry. So that industry is not at the same place as retail, but for sure we want to leverage that and be more closer and intimate. Let's say in terms of sharing data with distributors. That's a lot of value. So in the future, we would really like that kind of mindset goes beyond retail, and we can do that with many more partners. I think that's going to be because if you look at us, retail is about 2/3 of the total revenue. That's tissue. If you look at the other sector, packaging, there's a lot of opportunity too. It's not the same signals, but it's signal that we can leverage and again take better let's say, alignments or decisions together. So very exciting.
Mark, if I can jump in here, because Xavier said
Yeah.
something, maybe a parallel to what I was trying to communicate.
Yep.
What's the goal? And I'm going to put myself a little bit in Cascade's shoes. What are they trying to do? They're trying to sell, at least in this part of the business, tissue paper, right? They want consumers to be able to buy. And if your measurement, and this is very common, this is how most companies think, is do I fulfill the orders from the retailers, right? That's the OTIF, the on time in full. A retailer orders from me, do I get it to them? That's not the end goal. The goal is that the consumer buys it and they're able to buy it and where and how they want, right? And they're not switching to a competitor or going home empty or what have you. And so I think that shows like that maturity of saying, wait, the goal shouldn't be like OTIF matters, but it matters insofar as that we make sure that end result is the customer can buy. And we talked about allocation earlier, right? That ability to be like, hey, maybe I sacrifice on OTIF for one, because I'm going to make sure that my in-stock across the board is higher by putting it in the places that really need it. And so it's associating yourself and your goals and your organization around what is the real goal that matters. And I would say that's what I was trying to say for us. And I think technology as a whole is my goal should not be great. Cascade signed a contract with us and we've given them software and we're getting paid for it. The goal should be that we are so clearly driving value for us, Cascade, and in that process with them. And that's basically what we should be compensated on and what our focus should be. And I think too often you focus on the intermediate one. You're like, great, I got the deal. And they say that they're getting value. I want us to be totally aligned in the same way that hopefully Cascade is with their retailer on our goal is to be driving value to helping you run a better business. And that's how we get paid. If we're doing well together, we all win. And if we're not doing our job, then you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And there's theory and there's real life. In real life, the buyer sometime will be on vacation, sometime will be sick, sometime they will have a issue with their system. So for us, the job doesn't stop at shipping to the retailer.
Right.
We see beyond that, and sometimes we detect even from between their DCs and their store, there's something happening. The product doesn't get transferred to the store. We detect that as well. So it goes really beyond the traditional, let's say, scope, and that really empowers again the partnership with our retailers. So we care about all the 10,000 store that we service for each product. That's different than caring for 30 distribution centers. So a lot more data, a lot more complexity. It's tough for a couple of people to detect everything and write an email to send it to the retailer. So that's what we want to push in this next phase, which is starting pretty soon.
No, that's a great way to finish, guys. It's great. It's like the difference between, activity metrics and outcome metrics, right? There's all kinds of activities that you can track that have nothing to do with the outcome, or maybe they're indirectly tied to an outcome. But if you're talking about payoffs and compensation and rewards, right? It's best, like you said, Joel, it's a great point, is to focus on the commercial outcome that really matters the most, right? In terms of the financial health of the business, right? So that's a great point to end on, guys. Hey, this has been a pleasure and a privilege, guys. Xavier, Joel, thank you for today and as well as for episode 1. Folks, if you have comments, questions, if anything has sparked an interest or a question, please drop a comment below, and we will make sure we continue the dialogue. We'll track you down. But with that, I want to thank SAP once again for helping to make this series possible, Supply Chain Planning Reimagined. And we will catch everybody on the next episode. And maybe we'll catch these guys again down the road when we're moving even further into the autonomous phase at Cascades, maybe beyond just the tissue division. So we will look forward to that. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And thanks, everybody. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you.